This is paper 114 for the 2020 Speech Prosody Conference. Our paper investigates the relationship between prosodic ability and conversational entrainment. Conversational entrainment, sometimes also called conversational alignment, is a well-known and well-studied phenomenon which refers to two conversation partners becoming more alike over the course of a conversation in a variety of linguistic features. Therefore, then, prosodic entrainment refers to prosodic features becoming more alike over the course of a conversation. And the acoustic correlates of prosodic organization that have been found to exhibit and show this alignment or entrainment include fundamental frequency, speaking rate, vocal intensity or loudness, intersentential pause durations, as well as voice quality. The function of conversational entrainment in general and prosodic entrainment in particular is well established as being a social pragmatic or relational phenomenon. Prosodic entrainment tends to increase if the attitudes of the conversation partners, such as likability and attractiveness towards each other, are strong. Similar findings have been established in terms of the stability of the relationship of the conversation partners. Again, with more stable relationships or conversation partners that are engaged in more stable relationships, exhibiting more conversational prosodic entrainment. In addition to those interrelational characteristics, prosodic entrainment has also been found to correlate with perceived conversational quality, such that conversations that are judged to be of a very high quality typically also tend to exhibit much more conversational prosodic entrainment. Last but not least, prosodic entrainment is also correlated with conversational success, in particular in goal-oriented conversations such as a map task. However, it can also extend beyond the conversation at hand, in that it has been found that a person's overall ability to engage in collaborations can be measured or correlates with the amount of conversational prosodic entrainment that they exhibit. So while the function of prosodic entrainment in interpersonal interactions and as indicator of the quality of the relationship between conversation partners is well established, we know very little thus far about how individual characteristics such as personality traits or the linguistic skill level of a conversation partner influence prosodic conversational entrainment. This led us to our research question, which investigates whether a speaker's skill level in the area of prosody correlates with the amount of prosodic entrainment that this speaker will contribute at the conversational level. So in other words, what we want to know is whether speakers who have good prosodic skills are more likely to entrain to their conversation partners than those who have less good prosodic skills, or perhaps they will entrain less to their conversation partners if they have better conversational skills, or possibly there is no relationship between skill level and prosodic entrainment at all. So in order to investigate this, we recruited 20 participants, all native speakers of American English, and paired them into 10 conversation pairs. So we had 7 female-female pairs and 3 male-female pairs. All of our participants were students at New Mexico State University, and all of them reported English to be their native language. We also had them all go through a hearing screening to make sure that they didn't have any hearing deficits that could negatively impact their performance on our different components in the experimental procedure. So all of our participants were assessed using a prosodic skill assessment. We used the profiling elements of prosody and speech communication, short PEPC assessment. The PEPC consists of 14 subtests. 7 subtests assess the expressive or production of prosody, while the other 7 subtests assess the perception of the same prosodic features. The prosodic features that are being tested through the PEPC test relate to emotional, sentence level, as well as lexical level prosody. Once all of our speakers had completed the prosodic skill assessment, they then were paired up with their conversation partner and were instructed to engage in a conversation, essentially performing the diapics task. The diapics task is a goal-oriented conversation task during which the conversation partners, as you can see here, are giving a picture of a certain scene. This is the beach scene. And the first conversation partner would get picture 1, the second one would get picture 2, and then they would, through conversation, have to find 10 differences in the pictures that they were given. All of the conversations were conducted in a sound-treated room and digitally recorded onto a PC in waveform audio file format. We were using a Shure SM48LC condenser microphone for the recordings, and the recorded files were then transferred onto a PC for post-processing. In terms of our entrainment analysis, so what we did is we isolated the first and the last third of each conversation and extracted our fundamental frequency entrainment measures. We focused here on 2 FO measures, the mean fundamental frequency and the fundamental frequency range, to see if either one of these measures showed entrainment for the conversation. In order to assess entrainment, we created a vector that corresponded to the change in either mean fundamental frequency or fundamental frequency range. And this vector describes both the distance and the direction of the fundamental frequency change for each speaker in each conversation pair. And perhaps this is a little bit better visible in this figure here. So essentially what we did, we created a line L, which is representative of the common mean fundamental frequency measures for both speakers. And then we plotted the fundamental frequency measure for speaker 1 against that same fundamental frequency measure of speaker 2 at the beginning of the conversation, repeated that for the last third of the conversation, and that yields the vector based on which we received all of our measures. So once we had our vector, we determined each individual speaker's contribution to that entrainment as described in this formula here. And you're welcome to refer to our paper to see more specific descriptions of how these measures were obtained. So once we had our entrainment measures, we included all of those conversations in our statistical analysis in which a global entrainment in this particular measure was found. So for our measure of mean fundamental frequency entrainment, 8 out of our 10 diets exhibited entrainment, and so these 8 were entered into the statistical analysis. For fundamental frequency range, it was 9 out of the 10 conversation pairs that we could enter into this analysis. We've performed bivariate correlations between fundamental frequency entrainment contribution scores, both for mean fundamental frequency and for the fundamental frequency range for each speaker, and then we correlated that with the speaker scores obtained on the PEPC assessment. The correlations were performed on overall expressive and receptive scores on the PEPC, as well as on all 14 individual subtest scores. Overall, our results reveal that expressive prosody skill level, as assessed by the PEPC test, negatively correlated with prosodic entrainment contribution scores of a speaker for both mean fundamental frequency and fundamental frequency range. So in other words, what we found was that those speakers who show greater skill in expressive prosody tend to entrain less to their conversation partners. Now, looking a little bit closer at those scores and at the Pearson's R and significant levels of all the subtests, we see that the negative correlation between expressive prosody and the correlation of the entrainment measures for mean FO and FO range really are carried only by a subset of these expressive prosodic subtests. So we see that for mean fundamental frequency entrainment, the lexical stress subtest essentially carries all of the effect. It is significantly negatively correlated with the mean fundamental frequency entrainment. For the fundamental frequency range entrainment measures, we see that essentially the lexical stress subtest, phrasal stress subtest, the chunking subtest, and the contrastive focus subtest are the ones that carry the negative correlation. So overall, we observed a higher degree of negative correlation between the expressive prosody scores and our fundamental frequency range entrainment measures. So this is shown here in this figure in the solid black line. The correlation, the negative correlation between mean fundamental frequency and entrainment measures and expressive prosody was still significant, but less so pronounced. So unlike other studies that found that higher skill level in the domain of entrainment was positively correlated with conversational entrainment, our study found that skill level in the prosodic domain, especially when considering fundamental frequency, does not in fact correlate with more prosodic entrainment. On the contrary, those speakers who had high skill levels in the prosodic domain actually entrained less to their conversation partners. So what might one possible explanation be for our observed results? It could be that the observed results actually have to do with the functional load that fundamental frequency is known to carry in the realm of prosody. So the results simply may reflect individual differences in expressive use of fundamental frequency. In other words, some speakers may rely heavily on the fundamental frequency to express lexical and sentence level prosodic prominence, while other speakers may prefer to use fundamental frequency predominantly to express the social pragmatic aspects of prosody. And then perhaps they would use other means to express lexical and sentence level prominence, such as through durational cues or amplitude cues in the acoustic signal. So while there are clearly some limitations to our study, such that our participant number was relatively small, our design was not balanced in terms of gender, the results are interesting and should be further explored to understand the relationship between fundamental frequency use at the sentence and the conversational level. We welcome your suggestions and questions and any kind of feedback. Feel free to email me at the information given here. Thank you.